Hello, and a very warm welcome to Geo Institute's first digital symposium on consumers, technology, and data-driven marketing, a curated and content-rich digital event spread over 3 days, today through Friday, where subject experts from renowned universities shall cover an array of up-and-coming topics in the digital media space, with discussions around the key trends, the impact of exponential technologies, including artificial intelligence, on marketing, and understanding the evolving new age consumers. The keynote address today on artificial intelligence in marketing and the AI canvas will be delivered by Mr. Jim Lisinski, former Vice President Google and Clinical Associate Professor of Marketing, Northwestern University, USA. This topic sits right at the cusp of two programs that Geo Institute shall launch in July 2021. Programs in AI and data science and in digital media and marketing communications. To share more about Geo Institute's vision, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Mashelkar. Dr. Mashelkar is India's foremost scientific leader and innovative thinker. Dr. Mashelkar, National Research Professor, has been the Director General of Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Chairman of the National Innovation Foundation, and also the President of Indian National Science Academy. His pioneering research contributions to polymer science and engineering have been honored globally. 42 universities from around the world have honored him with honorary doctorates. Dr. Mashelkar was a member of the Scientific Advisory Council to Prime Ministers for over 30 years. He has been honored with Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, and Padma Vibhushan, three of the highest civilian honors. It is our deepest honor to have him as the Chancellor of Geo Institute. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prerna. I want to extend a very, very warm welcome to you all in my capacity as Chancellor of Geo Institute. Must say a few words about Geo Institute. I would say that Geo Institute is an inspired philanthropic initiative by Reliance Industries, which, as you know, is a Fortune 500 company, and joined with Reliance Foundation. It is driven by this great aspiration, great passion of Mr. Mukesh Ambani and Mrs. Neeta Ambani, and I'm very happy to say it is also guided through an advisory board, which has world's luminaries, including several presidents of some of the topmost universities in the world. The Ministry of Human Resource and Development in India has accorded it a status of institution of eminence. There are only a handful of such private institutions who have been given this honor. And of course, we have to live up to our reputation. As you know, Geo has created waves around the world. Even in lockdown period, Geo has been absolutely transformative. It has created transformation, massive digital transformation in India. And we expect that the Geo Institute will bring in such a massive transformation in the higher educational system. What is our vision? We have no legacy. So therefore, our vision is not just to copy the best practice, is to create the next practice. Our vision is to build a strong bridge between education, research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Our vision is to redefine interdisciplinary learning and research. Our vision is to build a vibrant, intellectually stimulating environment where our young minds will be able to take flights of imagination which are limitless. And but at the same time, we have to remember that we are in India. And we have to look at the special problems of India, making high science, technology, innovation work for India is another objective. So feet on the ground, but eyes looking with great aspiration. That is the design of the Geo Institute. Geo Institute is going to start with 2 medal programs, as was mentioned earlier, and I'm sure our Professor Deepak Jain, our most revered Vice Chancellor, will add to it. All that I would like to do is once again very warmly welcome you all. I really feel gratified with the overwhelming response that we had. I understand there is registration from 24 nations, and those who are joining us include some of the most eminent academics, leaders from academia, industry, civil society. Want to extend a particularly warm welcome to our distinguished speakers and panelists today, Jim Lesinski, Rajkumar Venkatesan, Carrie Burnham, and Sundar Madakshira, who just reminded me that in Bangalore for a lecture, we went by helicopter to a particular venue. It's great to connect with you all. And once again, welcome to you all for this great intellectual feast, starting with this symposium on consumers, technology, and data-driven marketing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your inspiring words. Now I would like to call on Dr. Deepak Jain, a globally recognized marketing and innovation expert whose insights have inspired generations of business leaders to pursue success with significance. Dr. Jain's influential career spans 3 decades as an educator, a senior business school administrator, and a consultant to corporations, governments, and world-renowned figures. He also has received the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman from the Prime Minister of India, an award that recognizes exceptional leadership contributions. I'm honored that he's our Vice Chancellor, and I request Dr. Jain, sir, to please share the academic vision and plan of Geo Institute.
Okay. Calling from Chicago, so let me start with a warm welcome. Rather than saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, let's just look forward to a good day. Dr. Marshall clearly articulated the overall aspirations of our founders, both Mr. and Mrs. Ambani. But I feel very privileged to be a part of this exciting venture. Very few people in life get this opportunity to build an institution from scratch. We have been part of institutions that were built with visionaries from all over the world, but this is an opportunity for us to create something that we all can be very proud of. Now, when you look at what we want to achieve, I always look at that the mission of an academic institution, I would put that mission as a threefold mission. The first is achieving academic excellence. That is where you go for knowledge creation, knowledge dissemination, and knowledge certification, because we academic institutions have the privilege to award a degree, whether it is a bachelor's degree, master's degree, or a PhD degree. So the first important thing is how we create this Geo Institute that achieves the highest academic excellence. The second mission is business relevance. Today, it is good that we bring the best concepts to our students, but the new generation also likes to see how our academic rigor is balanced with business relevance. And business relevance doesn't mean that everything has to be applied to business. The young generation today are aspiring entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs, we need to build in those entrepreneurs a desire for intellectual curiosity. and by intellectual curiosity, asking the question, what if it does not work? What if this happens? And that's what I mean by business relevance. And the third mission is social significance. And by social significance, we want to make a difference in the community, the society we belong to. And Dr. Mashelkar very clearly articulated in his opening remarks that this is a social significance vision for the Ambanis in terms of giving back to Mother India. You must be hearing a lot about Jio's achievements in the last 2 months. But to me, this is going to be a legacy of late Dhirubhai, Mukesh Bhaiya, Nita Bhavi, and the entire Reliance Foundation. And both Dr. Mashelkar and I feel privileged when Mr. Ambani asked us to be the two leading figures of this institute. Before I conclude, I come from a very humble background from a small town in Tejpur, Assam, where we did not have a university. But there was no university, but I had people who had been to university and who guided me. I have been blessed to have remarkable mentors in my life. And I feel that the real differential advantage that Indians and the Indianness in us can bring to this world is through education. That is our core sanskar, and our parents would not think of taking a vacation, but put all their resources in the children. I come from that family where people invested and said, "Acha पढ़ लिख लोगे तो जिंदगी में कुछ कर सकोगे." My father was blind and mother never went to school, but they raised 4 very good children. All 4 were gold medalists. So I also feel this is my way of what I have achieved in life. This is a very simple way to give back to those aspiring Indians who want to achieve world-class education, but may not have the resources to go abroad. And as Swami Vivekananda used to say, if students cannot come to you, you need to go where the students are. So we are bringing beautiful minds from all over the world to share their expertise, their experience with the aspiring Indians. And I'm really looking forward to the cooperation of all the people who are attending this and who are going to be a part of this exciting vision of our chairpersons. And I am very grateful for all of you to spare your time with us. And I'm sure this is the beginning of a journey that when we will reflect 10 years, 20 years from now, we will say, we feel privileged and blessed to be a part of it. Thank you all. And again, thanks to all the speakers for giving their valuable time. And I'm sure this is the beginning of a great partnership and a great learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing those pearls of wisdom and giving us the mantra of academic excellence, business relevance, and social significance. With this, I now invite Dr. Frank Mulhorn, our program mentor for Digital Media and Marketing Communications program. Dr. Frank Mulhorn is Associate Dean of Research at Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. He specializes in research. He specializes in research on economics of marketing, the impact of media technology and marketing communications, and the role of employees in customer experiences. Professor Frank is the architect of this digital symposium. Thank you, Dr. Frank, for bringing this together. Over to you.
Thank you, and good day, everyone. And good evening, I suppose. I'd like to say a few remarks about the Digital Media and Marketing Communications program that the Geo Institute will launch 1 year from now in July 2021. This will be a 2-year master's degree program, professionally oriented for people who want to work in marketing, media, advertising, all kinds of organizations, including corporations, agencies, government, nonprofits, and so forth. The program will have a very strong both Indian and global focus by bringing in prominent faculty from around the world as visiting faculty, as well as hiring full-time faculty on site. The program is one of two master's degree programs to be launched next year. The other one is artificial intelligence and data science. And to a certain extent, there is some overlap in those programs because some of the content in the digital media marketing communications program involves data analytics and artificial intelligence. And of course, we'll hear in just a few minutes a discussion of artificial intelligence and the impact it is going to have on the world of marketing and media. As Deepak was mentioning, the program is intended to be first-rate and very prominent, with very high-quality students, faculty, curriculum, and research. There will be a strong emphasis on academic research, again, much of it having an orientation towards the Indian marketplace, and particularly the Indian media industry, which is enormous and growing extensively based on demographics and a diffusion of media technologies and mobile devices throughout the population. So that's what the program will be about. You will see in this symposium 3 evenings of workshops on topics, artificial intelligence, marketing technology, and then about consumers, culture, and brands. All of these themes relate very, very closely to the digital media and marketing communications program and are intended to build excitement and interest and an orientation towards the very powerful impact that this master's program will have once it begins a year from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Frank. I also thank the 1,000+ participants who registered from 24 countries, 23 states, and 4 union territories from India, representing premier institutions and industry. This virtual symposium is being hosted on the Hubilo platform, a platform that enables interactions to share learning and foster community building. I request my colleague, Naman, to share a quick demonstration of the platform.
Thanks, Prerna. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 3-day symposium by Geo Institute. As mentioned by Prerna, it has been our endeavor to replicate the experience of a physical conference onto a digital platform. With that in mind, there are some exciting features on the platform on which we are hosting this symposium. As you can see on my screen, there are various tabs here. So on the agenda tab, you can quickly glance through what all sessions are planned during this entire 3-day symposium. You will also be able to see an event feed where you can post about how you are liking the experience. You can post about yourself. Just if you have anything to share, do post it on the event feed. On the speakers tab, you can see the entire speaker lineup for the symposium. You can check their profiles and you can check the entire lineup. Similarly, in the attendees tab, you will be able to see all the 1,000+ attendees that we have on our platform. You can also set up meetings with them and you can chat with them on a private basis. Lastly, we have an exciting feature called Lounge, which is similar to a physical conference room. So let me just show you a demo of how a lounge works. So this is a table of 4. You click on any of the chairs, and as soon as you do that, a meeting gets started with the person who's sitting on that particular table. Lastly, if you have any issues, you can just read the guides which are there on every page at this particular position. We hope to engage you all over the next 3 days. Thank you, and back to you, Prerna.
Thank you, Naman. I do request everyone to kindly share their insights, thoughts, and also share any feedback that you have. I would also suggest that, mention that the lounge and the platform is active throughout the 3 days, and it can be accessed off the conference hours as well. With this, I now request the star of today, the keynote speaker, Mr. Jim Lisensi, to share his address. Jim is a marketing educator and advisor. His focus is marketing strategy and digital transformation. He has 30 years of experience driving successful business results for major brands by developing and implementing integrated multi-channel digital marketing programs. His seminal book about the new marketing model, Winning the Zero Moment of Truth, has been read by over 300,000 marketers worldwide and was featured in the New York Times, Advertising Age, and Forbes. Jim's newest project, the AI Marketing Canvas, a 5-stage roadmap to implementing AI in marketing, learnings from which he will share in his keynote today, will be published by Stanford University Press later this year. Jim, over to you.
Prerna, thank you very much. Thank you, esteemed Dr. Chancellor Mashelkar, esteemed Dr. Vice Chancellor Deepak Jain, Dean Mulhorn, and thanks to all of you for joining today. I'm joining you here from Chicago, and it is my pleasure to spend the next 40 minutes or so providing an introduction to AI in marketing and this concept that Prerna alluded to called the AI Marketing Canvas. Following that, I will be joined by a distinguished panel, and we'll have a discussion on these topics, following which we will be glad to take your audience questions. So let's get started. I thought it would be appropriate today to start with a quote from Rashad Tabakawala from the Publicis Group, who recently wrote in a terrific post called The Great Reinvention, "Whenever there is a mindset shift, as there is now, given what's going on in the world, and new technologies emergent, such as 5G, machine learning, cloud, and voice, then in those instances, there are new industries and great new opportunities." And that's indeed what we want to focus on today. I know many of you, many folks, many brands around the world are still in a survival mode at this minute of where the virus and where the global economy stands. We're going to focus, though, today on forward growth. What do you do next? Where do you go from here? And what role can technology and mind shift play to help you grow your business? And so the question that we'll explore in this session today is how might you think about transforming your marketing to take advantage of Mindshift Growth's new technologies in order to drive business and enterprise growth. Now, as Prerna was kind enough to mention, I'm going to share a preview with you of a project that Dr. Raj, who you will hear from in our panel later, and I have been arm in arm close partners working on for the past year and a half. It is called the AI Marketing Canvas, and it focuses on, our work has focused on how AI and machine learning can be applied to marketing. Now, a bit of a disclaimer, this is not a technical first approach, but rather a customer first, a marketing first approach. We are pleased to have Dr. Larry with us on the panel, who is a technical expert, and I'm sure we'll go into more detail on the details of how AI and machine learning, computer science operate. But our focus is on using AI to drive growth rather than cost-saving efficiencies, where it also has powerful applications. Our goal has been all along, Dr. Raj and I, to develop a roadmap that we can offer marketers around the world, a path that can be followed, a framework that you can use to develop your AI growth strategy. We previewed this in a journal, an academic article in the California Management Review earlier this year. Dr. Raj and I would be happy to share that with you if you're interested. And as Prerna mentioned, this will all be discussed in a forthcoming publication later this year from Stanford Press. So I thought I would start with one of many global brands that we'll talk about today. You, of course, all recognize Starbucks here. Starbucks, of course, like your business, like all businesses, has experienced a difficult time here during the virus moment globally. But the 2 quarters prior to this, Starbucks was on a tremendous success roll. In the lower left, you can see for their fiscal year ending November 2019, another terrific earnings report. The stock dipped a little last summer, but then rebounded, and the analysts here write, Starbucks firing on all cylinders. Then the subsequent quarter that ended end of January in 2020, you see in the upper right here, Starbucks again outpaces earnings estimates. Warning, of course, of potential virus impact. But notice they were really on a roll. And I pulled this picture in the bottom right-hand corner of the Starbucks app, which I'll talk about in a minute, is a key to what has been driving that growth. And indeed, when we peel back and ask, well, what has been driving this global success that Starbucks has been enjoying? Now, one might think it's simply a matter of opening new stores. And indeed, they have been opening new stores. But even same-store sales growth in those 2 quarters, those previous pre-virus 6 months, same-store sales were on a tremendous growth, outpacing expectations. And in fact, during this period, they were not increasing advertising. Advertising by region was flat to down. So when CEO of Starbucks, Kevin Johnson, talks about what was driving this growth, what was their growth strategy, he attributes it to artificial intelligence. In particular, a platform that they built called Deep Brew. He said, the company has been ramping up its investment in artificial intelligence for the past couple of years. Deep Brew, he said, will increasingly power our personalization engine. And so the way this works, and I'm sure many of you are Starbucks mobile customers, with more and more customers signing up for the company's loyalty program, the opportunity to personalize in real time an experience for you, the right offer, the right message, the right product suggestion, the right pricing, the right place, and the right time on your phone, increases because Starbucks now has in excess of over 20 million global active rewards members, and that number is increasing 16% year over year every quarter. And so the analysts that follow Starbucks stock, folks at KeyBank in this instance, said, we believe that it's this enhanced digital marketing combined with personalization powered by AI and machine learning that will continue to power incremental growth and thus earnings and profitability and stock price for Starbucks into the future. We'll talk more about Starbucks in a minute, but I thought it was important to start with a global success story, lest you feel like what I'm talking about is science fiction or might be possible someday in the future. You see here a very admired global brand is driving its growth globally with AI. We'll talk more about Starbucks in a minute. But let's think about it from the customer's point of view. That was from sort of Starbucks or analyst's point of view. From the user, from the Starbucks customer's point of view, what do they get? Well, as Carl Worth, CEO of Evergage, said aptly, a great personalized experience occurs when a brand, in every moment, understands you individually as a person, not as a primary target segment or a secondary target segment, not as one of many million, but you as an individual, and is able to decide in real time what's instantly the right, best, perfect experience for you, and is able to respond immediately with relevance. And I'm sure all of you watching today have experienced and had such a tremendous personalized real-time experience, which led you to say, wow, that brand really understands me. I like that brand. I'm going to do more business with that brand and refer that brand or recommend that brand to my network and to my friends. That's what we're talking about here today. Now, of course, you students of marketing history will recognize that what I'm talking about here is, in a sense, a continuation of a journey, a long-term arc, as we call it in the book, of what marketers have been trying to achieve for decades. Of course, if you think back to the glory days of the middle of the 20th century, marketers were all about mass marketing, where you had one segment in many cases, no segmentation, maybe a primary or secondary audience, and the use of data and technology was low. You said the same thing to everyone. Of course, that evolved quickly into what we'll call precision marketing. Many of you probably practice precision marketing today. It's very important use of personae or personas that you might have a dozen or so different consumer journey personas, making medium use of data and technology, in particular research. which then evolved into what we'll call data-driven marketing with the advent of digital and the web, which now allowed us to tailor to hundreds of segments, a few hundred messages, with a medium to medium-high use of technology, in particular your customer database technology. But what Starbucks is doing, and what I'm talking about, is a leap across the proverbial Clay Christensen chasm beyond that. It's not just 101 or 102 segments. Starbucks is literally operating with 20 million unique segments, which they're able to do through the implementation, a high use of technology. As I just showed you moments ago, that technology being Deep Brew, their AI personalization engine. And so this is sort of what we see as the long-term arc of marketing. And this is what Rashad Tabakawala was talking about, of when there's a moment in time with a step change in technology available, you can make that leap across the chasm if you know the path to get there as a marketer. Now, delivering this deeply personalized experience, of course, requires a significant shift for brands, for companies, for marketing teams, and for each of us as individuals. My former boss, Eric Schmidt, in 2017 at the Cloud Next conference described it this way. He said, "I will bet that the future of your business and every business is the combination of big data and machine learning applied to the biggest business opportunities and customer challenges that lie before you." That's what Starbucks is taking advantage of, and that's what we're talking about here. That technology, of course, being artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, in our opening few minutes here together, I've just been kind of tossing those terms out, almost using them interchangeably, artificial intelligence and machine learning. It bears a few moments now to dive a little bit deeper into what exactly do we mean by those terms. Now, I realize for many of you this might be a brief review. For some of you, this also might be the first introduction that you're hearing about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'll give you a brief walkthrough of this, and we'll hear more from Dr. Raj and Dr. Larry about what these computer science approaches are during our panel discussion to follow. But I want to begin the discussion of what exactly is AI and machine learning with one of the great computer science minds, well, of all time, certainly of the 20th century, and that's the great Alan Turing. Now, you might say to yourself, Alan Turing, I've heard that name somewhere. Yes, he was part of the famous code breakers outside of London in Bletchley Park during the Second Great World War. And following that, he wrote a seminal publication here in October of 1950, where he, as I've underlined, posed this question. He said, "I propose to consider the question, can machines think? Is it possible for a machine to think somewhat akin to how we think as humans?" And that got him and the computer science world at the time deeply pondering this question. And to answer his own question, Alan Turing proposed what's become known now as the so-called Turing test. He said, if I have a human answer a question and a machine answer a question, and then I show those answers to interrogators, evaluators, people to look at the answers. And he said if a sufficient portion of those interrogators are unable to distinguish between the computer's responses and a human being's responses, then according to Turing and the Turing test, he considered that machine, that computer, an intelligent, thinking entity. But of course, it was not natural or a real form of intelligence. It was a form of, shall we say, artificial intelligence. And that paper and that Turing test got computer scientists all around the world engaged and thinking about, can machines think? How do we define it? How do we build on this so-called artificial intelligence? And then a few years later, in the summer of 1956, this man, John McCarthy, who became known as the father of AI and went on to a very distinguished career at MIT and then Stanford before retiring, convened all the world's great computer scientists to Dartmouth University in the summer of 1956 for a conference where he said, for this to become a field of study and grow and benefit the world, we need a common definition. Alan Turing started us out along that path, but we need to agree to a definition. And indeed, this was the definition that McCarthy and those computer scientists some 80 years ago agreed to. They said systems, machines, computers, that perform actions, which if performed by humans would be considered intelligent, but they're not performed by humans, they're performed by computers, so something artificial, we call that artificial intelligence. And so thinking further about the things that humans do, which would be considered broadly as intelligent, the 85 billion neurons that you have right now, that we all have, firing in real time, generally allow us to do three things we would consider intelligent. We can learn from the past, we can characterize the present, how am I feeling right now, and we're able to foresee and predict the future. Now I ask you to think for a minute, can computers do any or all of these three things? Do them well? Do them at the level that would pass the Turing test? No different than if it was done by a human? Well, certainly computers, even a basic spreadsheet, is able to look at your sales a year ago and classify whether last year's sales versus this year's were good or bad. You can characterize the present even with a simple spreadsheet and say, how am I doing against my quarterly sales target, quarter to date, right now at this moment in time? But it's this the third one, the ability to foresee and predict, that has challenged machines and computers for decades. Now, sure, there are some techniques like regression analysis, for example, that allow some form of prediction. But for those of you who've done regression analysis, I'll say in the format of predicting or creating sales targets for the future, you know that the minute you show your regression analysis to someone in the field, some of your sales folks, they'll immediately say, yes, but you forgot to account for this, or you didn't include that factor, or the model doesn't include the fact that we hear our competitors might be changing their price or launching a new product. It's that third one that really has devilishly been hard for computers to do. And this is the area that those early AI fathers, early computer scientists tackled for us. And so this brings us to some definitions: artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. I want you to think about those as sort of subsets of each other. Artificial intelligence is the broadest definition of the entire field. Any system that is built with the intention to think, if you will, in quotes, or reason like humans, that's artificial intelligence. Think of that as something like marketing, then digital marketing, then search engine marketing. The subset below artificial intelligence of machine learning is really our focus as marketers. And this is a special set of algorithms that were programmed explicitly with examples, not with traditional if-then statements, in order to predict the future. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then one way of doing that is so-called deep learning. And I'll show you that in a minute as well. But it's these two subsets, machine learning and deep learning, that offer the greatest promise for marketers to predict the future, like Starbucks is doing. And so I just want to reiterate and anchor on this point. Very important that unlike traditional computer programming that's based on a series of if-then statements, that you as the coder must code the program to handle every and any possibility and eventuality. In this case, the machine is given examples, many examples. Computer scientists call this training data. The machine then uses this training data to make a prediction, in a sense forward thinking. Then, based on the accuracy or inaccuracy of those predictions, course corrects, learns, if you will, and gets better and better over time at making these future predictions. Let's take a look at how this works. Machine learning has several different flavors or types of machine learning models, but two that I want you to be aware of are supervised learning and unsupervised learning. There are others like reinforcement learning, but for our purposes in the short time we have together today, let's focus on these two. Now, unsupervised learning on the left is a situation where when you as a marketer don't know the right answer that you want the machine to predict. So I put a question on the left there. How many customer segments should we have? I don't know the right answer to that. You don't know the right answer to that. Should we have 5? Should we have 50? Should we have 5 million? So the challenge that you'd like the computer, the artificial intelligence, to predict is one of clustering or grouping. On the other hand, we as marketers sometimes, in fact, do know the right answer. When we look at a customer profile, an individual record, we want to know, does this look like a good customer or not a good customer? Someone likely to stay with us or someone not likely to stay with us? Now, you know your business very well, and if you were able to study and have the time and ability and bandwidth to look at every row in your customer file, in your customer database, you could probably hand classify folks into good customers or not good customers. Obviously, that's not effective or efficient. You don't have the time. Plus, customer data is changing in real time based on, have they purchased recently, what did they buy, where did they buy it, how much did they buy, etc. So questions of labeling or classification where you know the right answer is also something you can ask the machine to predict. And there are many models that can do this. Here's a simple linear model based on, remember the formula from algebra, y equals mx plus b, where I can use two variables, maybe recency of purchase and amount of purchase, and I can plot all my customers, and I could ask the computer to come up with the best line to cut that population into good customers, not good customers. And then I would go, as I have in the far right hand 2x2 here, and score that and say, well, I was 86% right, 14% wrong with my good customers. I was 18% wrong, 82% right, predicting not good customers. Then I train the machine, rerun that again and again until that gets better and better. And again, Dr. Raj and Dr. Larry will expand more about how this works. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be a simple linear model. It could be very complicated. This is a calculus-based model where we have not two variables to predict good or bad customers, but the machine can use dozens, hundreds of different variables to put sort of a 3D wave through space to separate the population of customers in a very advanced, sophisticated way, far beyond what I could even do at my desk had I the time, the bandwidth, and the knowledge. And so you see here, this starts to now become human augmented by machine, human plus machine, to make these predictions for us as marketers in a way superior to that I could do myself on my own, or a way that the machine could do it on its own. Now, I mentioned deep learning. Beyond these statistical types of models that you may be familiar with, there is also non-statistical methods, such as a flavor of deep learning called neural networks, or in this case, a complex or a multiple neural network. Here, I use it for something like classifying images. So I have a picture of one of the founding fathers of the United States. That's our first president, George Washington, in the bottom left here. The machine translates that picture into pixels. It then encodes each of the pixels, and then layer by layer starts to identify what is it about these pixels that equal what we call George Washington, such that it's able to then classify or predict any future picture that I would give the machine as to the likelihood or probability that it is in fact a picture of George Washington, or it is not a picture of George Washington. And so this is a way a non-statistical neural network deep learning model can be predictive of things in the future. Now, that was a little abstract or kind of theoretical. I want to just show you a couple of rapid-fire examples of how machine learning is being used and applied in the world of marketing today. This is not particularly a marketing example, but building on this idea of using images in a complex neural network to make a prediction. Google researchers recently took several thousand biopsy cell images, scans, if you will, of lung tissue, and trained the machine to predict whether that lung tissue biopsy, whether those images were cancerous, benign, or precancerous. Now, of course, radiologists can do that, but we know that everyone in the world, all 7 billion people, aren't able to get access to world-class radiologists to make these kinds of predictive diagnoses. And so Google claims to have trained their machine to do that equally at the level of the world's greatest, best board-certified radiologists. So you see the application of this isn't just sort of trivial things like identifying pictures of world leaders. It actually has a life-saving possible application here. There are startups Dean Jane talked about students today want to be entrepreneurs. Here are some entrepreneurs based in Boston in the US who used machine learning to help you track your diet, your intake of calories. And the way this works is you simply take a picture of everything that you are about to eat with your mobile phone, and then the system predicts what is that likely dish and what are the likely calories, saturated fat, unsaturated fat, sodium and salt levels, etc., and tracks your caloric intake automagically for you with the predictive power of image classification there. Amazon will do this if you're in the B2B space and you need a part for a machine. For example, if a machine breaks down, time is money, and you need to identify a screw, a bolt, a nut, a band, or a belt, you can simply take a picture of this through the Amazon Part Finder app. It will predict what that part is. With one click, instant order it and have it delivered to you instantly so your machines, your plant line is back up and running. The folks at Procter Gamble have partnered with Snapchat to do similar. This is their CoverGirl line of makeup. This is a cover-up, a clear matte cover-up product where you can take a picture of any P&G product with your phone that's active in the system. It then predicts what that is. One click, you can buy it, have it delivered instantly to your door. So you can see that this is already being used by marketers around the world. Perhaps the one you're most familiar with from a predictive standpoint is Gmail, Google being able to predict what text you're going to type, as you see happening here. As you start to type, it predicts how you will finish the sentence. How does it know that? Well, it uses big data, as Dr. Schmidt talked about in my earlier slide. It knows what you have typed many, many times, and anonymously what others have typed in a similar context and syntax, and makes a prediction. And if you accept that prediction, you are training the machine that it made a correct, accurate prediction and reinforcing that it should do more like that. If you don't accept and correct the machine, you're training the machine to be better with its next prediction. And that doesn't just happen with text. It also can happen with images and photos. Here's 2 photos I took of my little niece. She's very cute here. Maybe you've seen something like this in Google Photos or other image tools. Where the machine said to me, are these the 2 babies the same or not? If so, they'll be merged together for future predictions of the name of a baby. And so in this case, they were. I clicked yes, and I've trained the machine to improve its predictive power and accuracy moving forward. So that's what I wanted to cover on this. I want to get into our AI canvas and marketing here in a minute. But if this is an area of interest to you, I highly recommend you read Prediction Machines, the excellent book by Ajay Agrawal from Harvard and his colleagues that goes into much greater detail than I was able to provide in our time together about the predictive power and applications of machine learning and deep learning to all aspects of business and marketing. But let's think about marketing in the 15 or so minutes that I have left in this keynote address. Marketing, if you think about what we do, it's all about making predictions to deliver that right, best personalized experience. Now you might say, I'm a marketer and I don't really consider myself in the prediction business, but for a moment, wait. You actually have to predict what's the right best product for my target audience. You actually have to predict before that who's the best target audience. Then you have to predict where's the best place for me to distribute and sell this product. You have to predict what's the right message, the right thing for me to say to that audience about this product. You have to predict what's the right price if you think about sort of the classical 4 Ps of marketing. And I know Sundar is going to share some evolved thinking about the 4 Ps during our panel discussion. But basically, essentialized, us as marketers, that's what we do, is we make these predictions. Sometimes based on intuition or our personal past experiences, sometimes based on limited data, sometimes based on some robust data, maybe a market survey or some robust market research that we've done. But it's all about making predictions. Don't believe me? Here's an example. You're running a Google search campaign. You need to predict 8 things to have the optimal search campaign. You need to predict what's the right keyword you want someone to type in for you to then appear as an option. You need to predict what's the right creative. What should that ad say? You need to predict the right landing page that you should take someone to. You need to predict who should see this ad. You need to predict what geography your search ad should be shown in. You need to predict what day of the week, what time of day it should run. And most importantly, you need to predict your bid. What is your max CPC? What are you willing to pay for that individual to click and then come to your website? So if you think about those 8 variables, and let's just say for the sake of argument among us that there's, I don't know, 10 reasonable options for each of those. Now, yes, I realize there are only 7 days of the week, but there are certainly a whole lot more than 10 keywords or 10 creative options. But for the sake of simplicity, you'll notice that that's 10 to the 8th or 10 billion possible combinations. How are you as a human, as smart and good of a marketer as you are, going to hand predict the right best single option among 10 billion choices? And that's just on your search campaign, not to mention all of the other aspects of marketing that you have to predict each and every day. So I hope you see that having machines help you and augment this level of prediction can make you a more successful, what we'll call modern marketer. So this is a chart that the fine folks at Forrester have put together, and they said, given all of the complexity and volume and velocity of data and options that are out there, if you're able to take advantage and do these kinds of machine learning plus big data predictive power, that's the promise of so-called modern marketing. Whereas in traditional marketing, human capacity was limited in what we can absorb in terms of data and our predictive ability. And so this gap here is what Dr. Schmidt was talking about between the marketers who use big data and machine learning to more accurately and better and in real time predict the future versus those who don't and continue to practice traditional marketing. This is the opportunity gap we're talking about. If you get on board and take advantage of this, it could be your return on investment, ROI. If you do not and ignore it and stay on this vector of traditional marketing, then your ROI is your risk of ignoring what we're talking about here today. We'll talk more about this during the panel discussion. But in fact, only about 50% of marketers have begun implementing marketing AI. Half are ignoring it. Half have done nothing. And so we understand that there's lots going on in the world, and you need to be focused on survival in many cases. What's the right thing to do for your customers, your employees, your stakeholders right now? But hopefully this discussion today, you're joining and listening, helps you start to think about what should I be doing, what should I be leaning into to help grow my business with big data plus machine learning. But of course, many of you listening, perhaps half of all marketers in the world when surveyed think this is just all hype or buzz that can be ignored. A couple of surveys here showed 47% of marketers think that AI and machine learning is just a buzzword. Here's an article that caught my attention that said, personalization, the buzzword of this year, will be gone in 5 years by 2025. Well, I hope we all have the opportunity to come back to a class at the Geo Institute together in 5 years, but I'll bet you personalization, machine learning, big data will not be gone by 2025. But whenever there's something new, there are always doubters and people who don't understand it, and it's easy to explain away by saying, it's just hype and it'll go away. I hope you're not one of those people. Now, why are only 50% of marketers implementing AI and machine learning? Is it a lack of knowledge? Yes. Is it a lack of resources? Yes. But most importantly, and this is what Dr. Raj and I saw that got us going on our project, the number one barrier, the number one reason why people are not on the plan of implementing AI in marketing is that they have no clear strategy. We have no plan, we have no path, we don't know how to build a plan or a path to implement AI in marketing. Maybe we see the promise, maybe we understand the technology, but we don't know how to get started and what steps to take. And so as marketing strategy professors, Dr. Raj and I thought, here's an opportunity for us to make a contribution. So what we did is we went out and said, well, if 50% of brands have done nothing so far, however, 50% of brands, 50% of brands, Prerna, I think we had a little glitch there. Can you just come off mute and tell me, are you still able to hear me and see my slides?
I can see you and I can hear you, but I cannot see your slides.
Okay, I'm going to go back in and reshare. Always the fun of a live webinar, folks. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to reshare, and we'll come up here. Are we back, Prerna?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Thank you for bearing with me, folks. So what we did was said, well, if there's already half of the brands in the world who are doing some form of implementation in AI and marketing, what can we all learn from them? What have they already learned that we can learn from as well? And so Dr. Raj and I went out and we researched and talked with and interviewed many, many global brands around the world. You see some of those logos here. I'll give you some examples from a few of them in a minute. And try to listen to what are they doing? How are they thinking about this? And I want to play just a brief 1-minute clip from one marketer who we listened to as she talks about what she's been doing getting started applying data and machine learning to her business. She is the Executive Vice President of Marketing for a bank in the United States called Regions Bank. Her name is Michelle Elrod. Let's just give a quick listen to her here.
Started actually a technology and a transformation journey in marketing probably now about 5 years ago. And the first thing we tackled was data.
All right, I think we had a glitch on Michelle Elrod. That's okay, bear with me, folks. We will tell you what she had to say. So when we listen to marketers like Michelle and the brands that we talk to, remarkably, a consistent pattern emerged. All brands that we talked to had taken 5 sequential steps, 5 levels of maturity, 5 stages to implementing AI in marketing. We classified those or organized those into what we call here the AI marketing canvas. I'll walk you through this, but you read it bottom to top. At the bottom, you start with stage 1, which is you need to build the foundation. From there, you begin experimenting and working with partners. From there, you start to build an in-house competency as you expand. Once you've built proof of concept, then you go to your CFO and you say, we're ready to make a big bet and fully transform our business and the way we market to be a modern marketer with AI first. And then you get so good at this, you're able to actually monetize it as a separate revenue stream. Let's show you some examples. So at that stage 1, as you've gathered from my comments here today, a prerequisite for the machines to be able to make predictions requires data. You must have first-party, first-person data about your customers. Now, I put this warning call out in the bottom right here. You must, importantly, follow all local relevant legal, social, cultural, regulatory, and ethical standards when it comes to collecting first-party data. We have a long section in the book on that. Time today doesn't permit us to do that, but I really have to reiterate the importance of abiding by all of those regulations, guidelines, and norms when you collect data about your company, about your customers. Now, some of you might have data. If you're a bank, if you're an insurance company, if you're a B2B, you already have customer records and first-party data, but many of you don't. For example, Unilever around the world, through the products that they sell, ice cream, personal care, food products, sells through kiosks, bodegas, supermarkets, Walmart around the world. They don't have first-party data. So what they did in some markets around the world, like in this case in Thailand, where the #1 social network is called Line, Unilever, for their Knorr brand of seasonings and food products, offered a set of these super cute emojis to customers in exchange for them agreeing to share some first-person, first-party data. And in fact, this was so successful in Thailand, Unilever tells us, they were able to then gather data on something like 2/3 of all households in Thailand as a result of this program. That data then, they were able to begin building predictive models using machine learning because they now had access to first-party data. So you have to have data to train the machines. With that data, you're now able to go and experiment, to try building some models, to try predicting things to see if it's better than the way you were doing it by hand previously. Now, at this point, some of you might say, well, wait a minute, I don't have a floor, a department, an army of advanced AI statisticians and machine learning model builders. We heard marketers say at this point, you don't do that and you don't need that. In fact, all of the partners that you're working with, we'll hear from Sundar at Adobe in a moment, Google, Facebook, your agency, etc. All of these vendors and partners already have likely AI-powered tools that you can use and implement to get some quick wins. An example of this is one of the big US banks we talked to, JP Morgan Chase, said, wow, we're using humans to write ad copy, digital banner campaigns, trying to predict which will get the highest click-through rate and sign up for our new banking products. Could we work with a partner? In this case, the partner they worked with was called Persado, to use the machine based on the data that they had on their customers to predict what's the personalized best individual copy, image, placement in media, where our bank ad should show. And in fact, as the CMO shared here in this article, click-through rate on those machine-generated ads jumped by as much as 450%, 4.5x, versus the handwritten ads that they've been doing previously. Now, of course, I recognize that ROI and click-through rate are not the same thing, but I hope you'd also agree with me that a 450% higher click-through rate is amazing improvement. And so that's what they were able to do, again, without hiring any data scientists or building their own models. They used partners to do this. But at some point, you want to begin to build an in-house competency. Maybe for those of us who've been in marketing for a long time will recall that we used to outsource website development and web building to third parties and agencies. Of course, most companies now have insourced in-house that. That's what we heard marketers do in this next stage, stage 3. We heard many of these organizations say they create a position. Sometimes it's a second hat position, not a new hire, but a additional responsibility for someone on the marketing team called an AI champion, whose job is to lead the in-house coordination efforts and start to build in-house competencies. An example of this was when we talked with the Coca-Cola company. The Coca-Cola company, of course, is doing a lot of this sort of personalized, automated creative like you saw in stage 2. But beyond that, additionally, in stage 3, they've got these smart vending machines all around the world in which they're connecting users directly to those machines with an app on their phone. The app then registers every product that you custom pour out of a Coke machine, how much orange Fanta, how much Coca-Cola, how much vanilla Coke, etc. You can create your own personal blend and save it. Then when you come back to the vending machine the next time, you simply show your QR code and it automatically dispenses, in this case, Jim's blend. I can then share that with all of you, all my friends around the world. I can find where these machines are located, but notice what's happening, right? It's now then giving Coke the ability to predict and recommend to me future new products, future new offers, future new locations on a one-to-one personalized basis. This was built with some outside vendor assistance, but it was an in-house led, in-sourced Coke project. That's why we call it level 3, where you begin to expand in-house. Now at this point, you have proof of concept, you've done a bunch of experiments with your vendors, you've done a few things in-house, you've started to see that this vector of modern marketing is giving you tremendous ROI from the brands we talked to versus the handcrafted traditional marketing model with a low use of data and tech. And so now you're ready to bet big. You're ready to say, we know this works. We're ready to transform how we market, transform our marketing function to be a ML first function. So in order to do that, you need to go to your CFO, as we heard these brands that we talked to have done, and either build a large in-house personalization engine, like Starbucks did, or buy or acquire something and then bring that in-house to do that for you. So let's look at 2 quick examples. In the B2B space, John Deere, the big tractor and combine global manufacturer, actually bought a company in stage 4. It was a Silicon Valley company called the Blue River Group a few years ago for $300 million. They had a technology that used real-time image recognition, cameras attached in the farm fields to the John Deere products, which in real time could look at every leaf on every plant in every field and instantly predict whether that was a healthy plant or a not healthy plant, Did it need fertilizer? If so, what kind, how much? Did it need pesticide? If so, what kind, how much? And then instantly was able to micro dispense the right amount, as opposed to a blanket prediction of, all the crops in this field seem to need this much fertilizer in general, and then blanket apply that. So of course, this Combine Advisor See and Spray system ended up being more effective in terms of the productivity of the fields by using at the same time 80 to 90% less fertilizer and pesticide, making it more beneficial to us in the world, more food being produced with less pesticide and runoff for the environment. It was more effective and more cost effective for the farmers. And of course, John Deere benefited from it along the way. I should note that they use this then to then be the basis of actually what they call John Deere JD Labs, where they started to commercialize other machine learning types of ventures in step 5 that I'll talk about in a minute. Starbucks, though, didn't buy a company. They actually worked with Microsoft to build that personalization engine that we saw at the beginning of this talk called Deep Brew. And that's what they did here at stage 4 after having worked up stage 1, 2, 3, and then got to this point. And this was, of course, a board level, C-level, CEO level decision, not just a marketing decision at this point. But then you can get so good at this and so effective, and it works so well that this machine learning marketing system that you built, you might be able to then sell it to other brands as a new source of revenue. That's what we heard stage 5 monetization being. An example of this is the news organization in the US called the Washington Post. They gathered first-party data about their readers, about their subscribers. They began experimenting in stage 2 with vendors. They began doing some in-sourced experiments in stage 3. They bet big in stage 4 to build an automated story creation engine called Heliograph, whereby they could ingest real-time data like weather, election, voting, Olympic results, for example, and then based on who you are, write and present to you an originated story in real time, such that you'd have a wonderfully personalized experience with the Washington Post. They figured, though, that this engine they built could be used by other smaller news organizations who on their own couldn't afford to build such an engine. And so that's indeed what the Post is doing. They're selling this as an additional monetized revenue stream to other news organizations in the US and indeed around the world. And that's the highest level of maturity of a marketing organization having gotten so good at building AI and ML applications in marketing that they can not only use it to grow their own business, but they can sell it to others as a new source of revenue for the firm. And so that brings us to some key takeaways as we prepare to bring our panelists in here momentarily. What do we hope you take away from my comments here today? Well, first and foremost, I hope I've convinced you that AI for marketing has tremendous promise. That it's not just a fad, it's not mere hype, it's not something that will magically go away in the next 5 years. That in fact, it's something that can benefit your top line growth, but you need a plan. Hopefully that plan, that path for you to take with your brand and your business can follow the 5 steps that Dr. Raj and I laid out in the AI Marketing Canvas. Organize your data, start working and experimenting with your external vendors, name an in-house champion and begin to in-source that competence and capability, prepare to make your big bet, build or buy. At that point, you fully transformed your marketing organization to be one that's ML and big data first, at which point you might be able to then externally sell or monetize the platform that you've built. Track your progress quarter by quarter up each of those levels. And don't forget, we only had a moment to mention it here, but do not please forget the important legal, social, ethical, regulatory, and moral issues here when it comes to first-party and consumer data collection. And now is your personal AI moment of truth for you as an organization and you as individuals. So some thought starter questions you might want to go back to your company and ask. What stage on the canvas is your business at? 1, 3, 5? What experiment will you want to go run for your organization if you're in stage 2? What changes would be necessary to how you collect and analyze data about your customers in order to be able to build the data foundation necessary? From your team standpoint, What changes in team talent, culture, process, and organization might be necessary? And what major challenges or barriers do you anticipate? And then for you as individuals, and we'll talk more about this as we transition to the panel, how are you going to prepare yourself to build your individual knowledge base and your career for a future that certainly will be one where machine learning gains and gains in prominence? A book by a prominent PhD, Dr. Raj Ramesh, called AI and You, is a good place to think about how this can play a role in your career. There's lots of courses available out there. Here's a set of 4 courses from the AI Marketing Institute, which are free, by the way, that you might want to take. I alluded to Microsoft. They've got a tremendous AI business school here, and I'll give you the link in the slides. Certainly Coursera and others, and future offerings from the Geo Institute will continue to give you the opportunity to invest in yourself to learn more about how you can be an AI-first marketer moving forward. And so with that, my last thought before I invite Prerna back and our panel is just to simply say thank you for offering me this opportunity to share some thoughts about the AI Canvas in this keynote address with you today. Good luck in your journey to transform both yourself and your brand to transform and deploy AI into marketing. And so with that, Prerna, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for that power-packed talk and for sharing applications of AI in marketing in areas as diverse as visual search and cancer research. AI is definitely transcending across functions and sectors and promises to make the experience more personal. In that, it seems like a seamless fit for marketing. As Dr. Deepak Jain always says to us, that the value of managers is to put a structure on an unstructured problem. And the AI canvas that you just shared, the approach actually seems to give a blueprint that brings in structure to implementing AI in marketing. With this, I would invite now our distinguished panel that we have here with us today that brings diverse experience in research and industry, from technology to application. We are joined here by Professor Larry Birnbaum, Professor Rajkumar Venkatesan, and Mr. Sundar Madakshara. Professor Larry Birnbaum is a faculty at Northwestern University, and he's the former department chair for the McCormick School in the area of computer science and engineering. He's also the program mentor for Geo Institute's AI and Data Science program. His research and teaching focuses on applied AI, natural language processing, intelligent information systems, social media, data analytics, machine learning with applications to media and journalism. He's also a co-founder of a company called Narrative Science. Professor Rajkumar Venkatesan teaches marketing technology products, marketing strategy, and marketing analytics at Darden School, University of Virginia in the USA. Dr. Venkatesan's research focuses on analytics as it relates to marketing, return on investment, customer lifetime value, mobile marketing, and the global political economy. We welcome you both. Mr. Sundar Madakshara is the head of marketing at Adobe India. At Adobe, he leads a team of marketers across all businesses and routes to the market. He is responsible for building a multi-year strategy for building Adobe brand. He has held leadership roles with companies such as Hindustan Unilever, Wipro, Visa, SAP, and Infosys. He's considered a pioneer in data-driven operating models in B2B marketing in India. I welcome you all to the panel, and Jim, I hand it back over to you for the panel.
Well, thank you, Prerna. And this was the portion of the day I was most looking forward to, was the opportunity to talk with 3 esteemed experts here. Mr. Sundar, nice to see you. Dr. Raj, nice to see you. Dr. Larry, nice to see you as well. Prerna, before I jump in, could we just have a quick time check so that we stay on your schedule? How would you like us to split panel versus Q&A time moving forward?
Yeah, so if we can have about 30 minutes of panel and followed by 30 to 35 minutes of panel and 30 to 35 minutes of Q&A, that would be good.
Okay, Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Prerna. Well, what I thought I would do is maybe ask each of the three of you to say hello, to say a few words, and maybe start by sharing. We'll start with you, Dr. Larry, if you don't mind. Start by sharing a little bit of kind of what's your work and your interest in the field of AI and machine learning. What's keeping you busy? What's your focus in this? And then we'll go to Dr. Raj and Mr. Sundar. So hello, Larry.
Jim, hi, thank you. And for all of you, wherever you are, I hope you and yours are safe in this very challenging time. So thank you for being here today. And for Jim, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. Well, as Prerna said, I've recently stepped down as chair of computer science at Northwestern and had this fantastic opportunity to, which I'm privileged really, to join as an advisor to the Geo Institute's new AI and data science program. I hope my voice is sounding stronger now. Is this better? Good, thanks. Okay, so the main thrust of my work over these really several decades now has been in applied AI and natural language processing, as Prerna mentioned. And right now I'm focusing really on three areas of work. The first is storytelling from data, which is the work that gave rise to the company Narrative Science that you mentioned, and by the way, which Jim is an advisor to also, so thank you, Jim, for your work there. And the company's premise is really pretty simple. The idea is to make the world's data understandable to people through storytelling, to make all of the world's data really understandable to people through storytelling. And one of the great lessons of the data revolution of the last few years is there's really no point in analyzing and gathering all the data that we're gathering and analyzing if you can't make the results understandable to people in a way that they can take action on. And that's really what gave rise to visualization as such an important topic in computer science. But from our perspective, really, it's the narrative that comes from the data that are really important to convey to people so that they can really understand and take action based on what's in the data. And that's the premise of the company. So my work there has really been very exciting in terms of making data accessible to people. Two other areas that I'm working on right now are, first of all, conversational interaction with computers. So I'm very interested in the idea of natural language, not just the text analytics, but really in making machines able to communicate with people in a way that's really accessible and natural to everybody. And the data revolution certainly has made that possible through speech interfaces, but there's a lot to go in terms of making those speech interfaces something that's genuinely helping you carry out a task in some way. So a few years ago, we actually built one of the world's first interactive cookbooks, talking interactive cookbooks, which was a lot of fun to do. But more recently, I'm actually working with some students to try and build a talking interactive first aid manual. So that's really kind of the focus of that kind of work. So things to help people do important tasks in real time, where those tasks require the attention of their hands and their eyes, so that speech becomes the very natural interaction modality. And then finally, I've been doing a little bit more fundamental work with some colleagues on trying to extend the semantic capabilities of current statistical machine learning technology in natural language, which is incredibly powerful and robust, but as I think we're all aware, still has some limitations from the point of view of its capabilities compared to human beings. So those are the three areas that I've been working in over the last few years.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry. And we'll come back to having you, I think, shall we say, augment, if not correct, some of my explanations here momentarily on how this works, given your expertise. Dr. Raj, nice to see you. Dr. Raj and I have been good colleagues for a long time, and I was pleased to represent a lot of his thinking in my keynote, so much credit to him there. But how are you today? You want to share a little bit about what you've been working on? Oh, I think we've got you on mute, Doctor.
There we go. You need to have at least one person who is muted, right, on Zoom when they speak. So that person is me today. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for including me in this webinar. And it's exciting to see as well the Geo Institute and the initiatives here and the new program that is coming. And a little bit about me. I teach, as was mentioned, marketing strategy and exec ed students on customer centricity and customer journey mapping and digital transformation. My research is on customer engagement and predicting and managing customer lifetime value. I started my PhD and research career building models to predict customer lifetime value and connecting how marketing can be managed to maximize lifetime value. And this was when we were looking at this old targeted marketing, direct marketing, one-on-one marketing world, and the old systems of Siebel and SAP were just starting. And that's when we were doing this, and it was interesting to see you say like how personalization is the new big thing now, and when maybe in 10 years from now we'll be talking about how this was so passé. So in terms of other things I do, I have, in addition to the book, which I enjoyed working with you on, which is forthcoming next spring, I have a book on marketing analytics that was basically taking my course in Darden and converting it into a case book on how to use analytics for real stories of real companies, connecting analytics with marketing strategy. In terms of research, I'm working on things around AI and company strategy on AI these days. So I'm working on one project which I'm really excited about with some colleagues in India, actually, on acquisition of AI firms pre and post GDPR. Is the market, how is the market valuing firms based on the fact that they're now going to use customer data to make their money, and with privacy regulations, how is the reaction of the market to that? Another project continuing the customer lifetime value theme is on networks of Salesforce. When you have teams of Salesforce talking to a same company, how does these internal networks actually affect customer acquisition and cross-selling products? And finally, I built a simulation software on media attribution, which I'm excited that it's going to launch later this month, on how managers can actually try with like a fitness app, a simulation game, to see how they can manage media across multiple channels, which is one of the main challenges in terms of combinatorial. There's so many combinations that can be done. Outside of work, these days, as we all are trying to figure out things to do when we are at lockdown and at home, I like kayaking, I'm working on my running, and I've been taking a lot of pasta classes, and proud to say I know like at least 3 different pastas that I can make now, and having a lot of fun with my family doing that.
Wow, wonderful. Well, we look forward to when you can invite us all over to your house to enjoy your pasta. Wonderful. Mr. Sundar, nice to see you. Tell us a little bit, please, about yourself and your role and some of the exciting things in this area that Adobe is doing.
Yes, thank you, Professor Jim. I think, when Geo University decided to call a panel of people who could speak on this topic, I thought they wanted to have experts, but they also wanted to have a student of artificial intelligence in marketing. And that's the role I'm here to play. I head marketing for Adobe in India, arguably one of the most interesting companies in the most interesting geography in the world when it comes to adoption of new technologies. So I think my current time is at Adobe. The last 3 years has been looking at the way our customers have been adopting new technology and how they're thinking in such non-linear terms into not just becoming best in India or best in Asia, but becoming world-class organizations by looking at adoption of technology, artificial intelligence in a whole new way than what I myself had thought that they would. So every day is an interesting story for me. I get to meet one CMO at least every single day, and just hearing his ambition and the future landscape that he has laid out for his company and the importance of marketing on that strategy table, and to be able to infuse technologies such as AI and turbocharge that marketing engine is fantastic. There's never a dull moment in my role. and every day is a learning opportunity. I take some time to share this, of course, with my colleagues, but more importantly, I spend a lot of time teaching at several institutions on the topic of this, on this topic. I think you spend a lot of time on looking at data in the story, but I think I'm very, very puzzled about how do you look at the story in the data that you can do and run effective campaigns from the data that you emerge. So I've got some interesting anecdotes to share as we go along. Thank you, Jim.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll go to Dr. Raj and then Dr. Larry. Dr. Raj, I think it's a natural question some folks might have at this point of some of these terms, cluster analysis, k-means, regression analysis. We've known these, we've done these for years and years and years, even predictive analytics. What's really new or different here? Isn't this the same as what we've always been doing? I run regression analysis in my business and my brand. How is this different? Oh, mute, Raj.
Thank you, Jim. This is a very important question, definitely. And the way, I mean, this has been something I have thought about as well a lot in terms of what is really different. And because, I mean, marketing has always been about big data. When we started with IRI or AC Nielsen in the 80s, we had tons of data about customer purchases, and we've used statistics to analyze all this data. So what is new really going on here? And so one of the things I then found out is there has been a real shift in how AI has approached itself. And I think that is where these worlds have merged. So before, when I was in undergrad in computer science, we learned about expert systems and neural networks. And Larry knows a lot more about this. I was a student, he was the teacher. But, you know, it was about expert systems. It was rules. And machine learning and statistics was about analyzing data. These two things intersected when AI became data-driven. So what does that mean? So before, when the expert systems were, you said a dog had a brown, if you had to describe a dog, the computer, you would write a rule in it saying it's a round brown circle with 3 black circles within them for the 2 eyes and the nose. But then that could be the same thing for a muffin as well. So now you can easily see how these things get confusing for a computer, and how many rules do you start writing? Do you start writing about whiskers? You can see muffins also that have some whiskers around their eyes, right? So what happens then? So the real breakthrough happened when AI then went from expert systems to data-driven, right? And that's when this whole field started merging. And the basic principle is you feed a lot of images of muffins and dogs to the machine that are pre-classified by humans. And then the machine learns to predict these classifications, form its own rules, create all these nuances just like a baby would do, and then try to figure out the human process as much as possible. And this was the strategy used by Fei-Fei Li at University of Illinois for image recognition, which eventually morphed into Google Images. Larry will speak a lot more about that as well. So AI is, like you mentioned in your slides, the bigger bucket. And then we have ML, which is where we try to gain understanding about customer insights. And then within that, you have neural networks, which is deep learning. So the really new things has been the use of AI to do neural networks and machine learning and image recognition and the chatbots that Larry was mentioning that he built for cooking, right? And within marketing, this makes a big difference because now you're talking to machines rather than typing. And so it's becoming more and more like futuristic, and the brands have to then project themselves as talking back to the consumers, and that creates a whole new world. And this is where I feel there is the power that AI uses to personalize like acquisition, retention, growth, and advocacy.
Great. So Dr. Larry, please jump in here. You know, you've worked with many entrepreneurs, companies, brands, businesses, marketers. What are some of the things that you see them doing as a best practice when they start to think about how to apply AI versus what are some of the common pitfalls that you advise against and that you see brands making?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think, you know, when I advise organizations, sort of corporate organizations, about how to think about AI, I always start by asking them to think about prototyping something themselves, not because they're necessarily going to build it themselves. They might not really have the complete competence in-house to do that, or even want to acquire that competence initially. You know, you talked about those stages that organizations go through, but it's a great learning to actually try and build something yourself using some relatively simple components off the shelf or open source, because you learn about the problem, and then also, frankly, you learn about how to talk to vendors and evaluate them, and whether they actually understand your problem the way you do. And I think that's kind of a critical part. So I think it's very important to invest a little bit of effort in prototyping stuff in-house, just to develop enough savvy to be able to sort of really have a good interaction with potential vendors or consultants when you're trying to build things with them. And I think that's a big key. You might not build it yourself, but you'll understand the problem a lot better.
Yeah, and I think implicit in your comment, if you want to agree or disagree with me here, is you also, I think, need to know what problem am I trying to solve, right? Like, what variable am I trying to predict? I use the example of good customers and likely to leave customers. What am I trying to predict? And if I could predict that better, would it have a meaningful impact on my business?
You know, absolutely. I think you need to and in fact, kind of in the style of iteration or agile, I think building the prototype again is a way to actually come to understand your problem a lot better and understand what's doable a lot better. I think another place to be cautious or ambitious, both, is that the line between what's doable and not doable is a little mysterious right now, and it's moving all the time. And so kind of to make sure you're on the frontier, you're sometimes going to overshoot a little bit. So it's, I think, important to be ambitious, but to make sure you understand quickly whether something is really going to be doable in the time frame and with the resources you have in mind, or whether maybe it's a better thing to try and pick the doable problem and work on that instead. I think that's always a big challenge. It's a big challenge in research too, by the way. I mean, if you're going to do a project, you'd like to get it done in 3 years, not 30. So.
Right. Yeah. Sundar, why don't you chime in here? Tell us a little bit, you alluded to earlier about some of the brands that Adobe that you work with, some of the CMOs that you've been talking to. What are you hearing? How are they approaching it? How are they getting started? Or what are some of their challenges and advice you give them?
Sure. So Jim, I'd like to summarize it with 4 points and 2 quick examples. I think, we've always known the 4 P's of marketing that Professor Philip Kotler gave us many decades ago, and they still hold good. A lot of these frameworks are very, very useful, but in the new world, I think they have to be reinterpreted in slightly different ways. One, I think 4 P's of modern marketing, the topic that you alluded to, I think number 1 is powered by data. I think data runs your business. You need to know that. The data that you have in all forms needs to get integrated, and you need to be able to make decisions based on that. So that's the first P. The second one, I think, again, which a lot of people alluded to, is personalization. The dream of every marketer is to market one-on-one, irrespective of which business you deal with. Everybody wants to look at giving messages which are extremely personalized at that point in time, which is relevant to that particular customer. So that's the second P. The third one, I think, in this world, we live in a phygital world. Even in the COVID world, it is phygital. There is a physical part of it, and there is a digital part of it. So you need to be able to understand data and marry data across both these channels. And this is probably the most common challenge that many businesses face when they have data coming from very disparate sources, and they still have to merge it and make a sense and come up with a strategy that works for them. So that's the third P, which is phygital. And the last one I would say is putting everything on a platform. It's very important to put everything on a digital platform, which helps you organize this data, be able to analyze it, and be able to predict using artificial intelligence paradigms. Adobe, of course, has been at the forefront of this, but let me share with you some very interesting case studies that we have done with some of our customers. It's first of all is on content creation. Adobe's products can help you actually predict the way you design and create content. So by which what I mean, if you have a photograph and you're a photographer and you take pictures and edit in a certain way, Photoshop can actually sense the way you edit typically and go ahead and actually give you those options well ahead of your, even before you get to that. The second way we do that is also by looking at what kind of content is required for which particular purpose. So if you're using a print media, how should it look? If it's a digital media, so it repurposes, the content itself repurposes for the medium that you're using. So that's the first use case that I'd like to count. The other one is about travel companies. I heard an interesting concept. Yeah, somebody was sharing with me that there is a concept of revenge travel that's going to come up, like revenge shopping, where people have been clustered in for too long. They've missed an entire summer vacation in India and in other parts of the world as well. So what are people going to do? That the people going to be coming out as soon as the situation gets even marginally better. Travel safe again, but do it in whole different ways. Now, this is where the challenge for the marketer is. He's got a lot of data, which is old, which is pre-COVID, but post-COVID, how much of that data and the paradigm can be used is really the call of artificial intelligence. Because really, if you look at what's going to happen is, not all the data is useless. There are a lot of aspects that can still get reused. And the more data that you have, the better you will be at predicting how it's going to come in. So don't ignore the data, which some people probably are making the mistake of doing that. The other one, last one that I like to give an example is that of an insurance company, which is using artificial intelligence to predict the risk propensity of its people who are buying insurance. So they have a beautiful way of integrating data coming from so many different sources, including the time at which somebody actually charges his phone when it's dying. So if somebody is totally averse to charging, totally averse to risk, he's going to charge it the moment it touches 50%. We're looking at data coming from very, very interesting sources to come up with a risk profile of customers. These are some of the the interesting case studies that we've used. But I think the one which really tops it all is in an automotive industry, they're using psychographics to position a car as a technology car, as a technical car, the internet car, in a rather crowded Indian automobile market. And they've just taken the market by storm by just reaching out to those people with a certain psychographic. Now, all of us know how difficult that is. It's easier to hit people with a certain demographic profile, but psychographic adds a whole different complexity into it, and they've done it. So this is what I'm busy, Jim, doing nowadays, and hopefully in the next few years we'll have more interesting case studies.
Wonderful. Thank you for those great case studies and that reinterpretation or redefinition of the 4 Ps. That was wonderful. Dr. Raj, we should probably talk in the minutes that we have left a little bit about team structure, culture, organization. There probably are some marketers listening to us here today saying, oh my gosh, do I have the right people? Do I need to retrain? Do I have to go hire an army of data scientists? Do I need agile process, as Larry referred to? So Raj, maybe talk a little bit about your advice to folks listening here from the marketing organization standpoint.
Yes, so this is certainly a big challenge. And I think this is something that is a lot of marketers are struggling with, people who we talk to. And the brands that have been successful are the ones who have been able to take the whole company towards this purpose. And some of the things that are, there are some things that are encouraging and things definitely that are challenging that companies need to address, right? So the encouraging thing is this is doable. This is, companies have done it, and you can start today. And you don't need like a big database or a big system in place before you can start, right? And almost everybody has Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, and you can use the data like you mentioned in the first stage, which we talk about is with the data integration. The first is to get first-party customer data. right? To look for places in your company where you are having a direct interaction with customers. And what kind of information can you get about your customer responses as well as your firm actions? And having that data, working with vendors to start with some small experiment to see if I can, in a certain segment, customize, say, the promotions that I give for my product to to one particular segment or so forth. And so that, or even can I advertise with a particular message like Chase did to some segments of customers, right? So you start with a small thing there and learn and move on from, and learn and develop from there. I think you don't need a grand vision. You don't need like $20, $30 million upfront to start doing this. You work with what you have and build and show the proof is in the pudding and then move from there. I think that attitude, I think, is necessary. And of course, these days you have a lot of, there is a commoditization happening. There's good work done by companies like Adobe with their platforms on analytics that, you know, you can start tapping into. So even if you don't have an in-house team, you can start with these cloud-based services, learn from it, and then go and build your own team.
Absolutely. Level 1, level 2, right? For sure. So before we transition to audience question and answers, and Prerna is going to rejoin us momentarily, I'd like to go Dr. Larry, then Sundar, and last word back to Dr. Raj with some thoughts. Larry, first of all, anything else that we didn't get a chance to address that you'd like to share with the audience, but then also maybe just a piece of advice from each of the three of you of something in this space that you would recommend folks start doing, stop doing, or continue doing. So microphone is yours, Larry.
Thank you. First, I think the point Sundar made about the phase change we've gone through and how that affects statistical machine learning models that were built using data from 6 months ago, even, or 3 months ago, I think is a really critical one. And by the way, this is a really, I think, important area for continued exploration and pushing the technology to make it sort of amenable to kind of control via sort of knobs and things that would let you actually tune it quickly to new situations or understand what parts of it are applicable to new situations. I think that's going to be a big challenge in the technology going forward, and one that I think will be very exciting and I think will develop pretty quickly. So that was a really an important point, and I don't think we should let it go by. It's really a key. I think there are two things that come to my mind. One is the issue of where small businesses will actually get the data, which I think is really a really interesting challenge, especially in the context of a nation like India, where there's small farms and small businesses, and how to make this technology accessible to them and usable and useful by and for them, I think is really a critical challenge. I thought the Unilever example in Thailand was very informative, but that was a big campaign in and of itself. So I think the question of how small organizations can acquire the data they need to build models, I think is really a very critical one, and one that's going to bear some thought and a lot of effort. I mean, one of the good things about certainly getting beyond transaction data is going to be interesting, because they're not going to have that transaction data. So making sure that they have access to social media data, for example, to make those predictions is going to be really very critical. Finally, I'd like to say something about personalization. I was struck by a quote in your talk also from Carl Worth about helping organizations decide what would be a good experience for you. I'm a big believer that the future is going to be sort of collaborative human and artificial intelligence, people and machines working together. And so I think a future that I'm excited by is one where we work together with the machines to decide the experience that's right for us. And that helps make the experience all the better, because it's maybe a piece of self-exploration or self-understanding as well. I think there are a lot of situations where people don't even understand the possibilities that are in front of them, or the things that they might want to do or might be able to do. And I think some model of joint exploration of these possibilities, I think, is almost the highest expression of what marketing is to help us kind of understand the world and understand how we can relate to the offerings that the world has to sort of understand who we are better and develop ourselves better. So I think that's really a big part of the future I'm excited about.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Dr. Raj, and then Sundar, last word.
Yeah. So in terms of how to think about it, what's in my mind is that the pandemic and what is happening here and what Sundar talked about with the data being different now, right? Because the system before was different than the system going forward. Now we can think about it, oh yeah, the data has changed and what do we do? Or it's also an opportunity. I think the opportunity comes in the way of the fact that all the consumers are online. The companies have enough support within the companies to be digital or at least have some aspect of digital, which means your ability to collect first party data just got way better than what it used to be. So as an opportunity for companies, your internal employees and customers want to be online and you're collecting data. The second thing, which I think is for someone who is thinking about how do we do this, where do we begin, are we already behind? Think about this. Everybody has hit pause and are restarting. So if you are a company who is just starting, guess what? The world gave you the best reset machine. You are now restarting with everyone else, and you have time to catch up. And when we reopen, the things are different. Consumers are going to be different. World is the way our perspective is going to be different. So we all have to relearn our models, relearn the way we do things. So we can think of it also as an opportunity that if you haven't started yet, this is the time. You have the best time to learn and grow with everyone else.
Yeah, everyone's at the starting line now. Yeah, great, well said. Sundar, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd just like to make a couple of points. One, I think, is that before anyone embarks on his journey for artificial intelligence, he's got to build a picture of success for the company. He's going to tell it, he has to predict and he has to be able to tell the company, look, this is what success looks in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days and beyond, right? If you don't do that, you'll be running into some very sort of very unrealistic expectations. I think which is what happens in many of these implementations and in many of these adoptions. So I think clearly putting together a roadmap and committing to certain very measurable metrics that they will measure not now, but 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now. And if nothing is going to happen in 90 days, I think you should be clear too. But look, 90 days, nothing is going to happen. And then we will start to see the results. Never overcome it on that timeline. Second thing I think we should not be, and I hate saying it in a negative way, is never undermine the cultural change that a company has to undergo when it is adopting. It's not just a nice tool that you get in and then everything suddenly magically changes. It impacts the job, it impacts the perspective of everybody in the supply chain. So I think when you're doing this, I think one useful tool to use, one useful framework is a simple question called why. Why are we doing this? So that takes the fad out of it, because you say, no, we're not doing it because everybody else is doing it. We're doing this because it makes a certain business sense. And I think I completely agree with Professor Venkatesan when he says, this is the time to accelerate. And I was so surprised initially, but not anymore, that when COVID hit, many companies which were very, very severely hit on day one, not on day two, but on day one, have used this opportunity to accelerate and say, look, where we have landed because we did not have a digital mindset. Now we are not going to pay the price, continue to pay the price 12 months from now, 18 months from now. So if there were any obstacles, they get removed automatically. So these were the three thoughts that I'll leave you with.
Wonderful. Well, thanks to all three of you. Appreciated that panel discussion. And I would like to now transition and invite our host and moderator, Prerna, to rejoin us. And she will MC a question and answer period for our panelists to answer some audience questions. Hello, Prerna.
Sure. Thank you so much. And this is a very insightful and intriguing discussion from impact of COVID to sort of really resetting the graph, and how AI will learn in this new paradigm is something that we all need to think and think and grapple with. So with that, I would start with a few questions that have come in. One of the questions that I think many people have asked is how do you think implementing AI and ML in business strategy in Indian scenario will be done, especially in a land which has many languages? Um, how do you think we can localize the AI in marketing here? So over to you, Jim.
Sundar, you want to start there? Raj, I know you might have some thoughts here as well.
So I don't think we should talk about AI as something which is going to happen, 10 years from now. As we speak, we are at least 7 years into implementation of artificial intelligence systems in India in marketing. It's not just in India, everywhere in the world. So let's not talk about it like some new planet has been discovered. It's well on its way. The implementation already got done. Coming to India, I think the challenge is no different than implementing any other digital transformation project. So it just doesn't matter. There are systems which can read prominent English Indian languages. There are systems which can read prominent languages up to 225 dialects can be read, and artificial intelligence can very well be implemented. As we speak, there are many, many companies which are already doing it. So it's no different, and there's no specific challenge as far as India is concerned. Actually, it's in many ways the Indian the population has taken a like a leapfrog. We're very good at taking leapfrog, so we've taken one more leapfrog by using we access the internet through mobile data, right? And so a lot of data, a lot of information is already available in the local languages. 12 prominent Indian languages that I'm aware of, AI parameters work very well on them. So it's work in progress as we speak.
So I can add to, I think I would to this by thinking about it, not about the language. AI, certainly natural language processing is a big part of AI, and that's true, but marketing is beyond promotions. So if you think about, I think some of the things I hear when I talk to venture capitalists in India is where the activity is around distribution and the AI in terms of operations of actually logistics, and which is the backbone of all digital transformation. And how do you actually manage the distribution networks and the routes and the people that carry the products around? I think there is a lot of AI going on there. And the other place where you see a lot of activity is also around payments and finance, consumer finance. And I think so even in those things, I don't think, so if you think about things that are really for India and for things that are really Indian specific AI, these are really big places where a lot of activity is happening, in addition to what Sundar was talking about in terms of the languages and the differences we have across regions.
Sure, thank you. So my next question is that, this is from Dr. Bijal Mehta, who's an associate professor at Ahmedabad University. She asks, with all the buzz about AI, where does that leave the human touch and orientation, particularly in the service-related businesses?
Yeah, I think, Dr. Larry, you were alluding to the combination of human plus machine.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think that's where the future lies. I think one of the interesting things about the Turing test even is if you can't distinguish the human's answers from the machine's answers, that's the definition of the machine being intelligent. Of course, what if you could distinguish them, but sometimes the machine's answers were better, and that's actually the case right now. In other words, machine intelligence and human intelligence are overlapping, but they're not identical, and they're not going to be identical. So I think there's really, the model going forward has to be how to build on the strengths of both of these things to really make the world better, and how to help, in this instance, help customers find what they need and what will help them move themselves forward. So I think that's really quite critical, yeah.
Yeah, and I might just chime in here and add this. what we've talked about today, applying big data, machine learning, does not eliminate or reduce. I would argue it actually increases your requirement or expectation as a marketer to have first-person consumer research, ethnographies, go talk to people, go walk through stores, go interview them, go in their homes, etc. I recently wrote an article with one of the other Kellogg professors on a couple of techniques to do this. It seems like, unfortunately, more and more marketers that we talk to now try to sit in their office and run their business off a spreadsheet or machines. Yes, great, use those things, but you still have to go talk to people and then bring that into your plan. Would you agree, Larry?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, yes. I mean, first, because the systems aren't complete yet, but second, because, again, what the machine is good at and what we're good at overlap but aren't the same. I mean, they have to be enough the same that we can communicate with each other, but they don't have to be identical, and they won't be.
Prerna, next question.
Yes, sorry. Sorry about that. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so this question is for Mr. Sundar. So what are psychographics? Can anyone learn and implement it in business? And so the person who's Elvison D'Souza, he's a founder of Power Inc. He says that I feel that data analytics could mislead the result of what consumers want and what is actually needed. So they might be basic necessities which are necessary to consumers. So how would you address that?
So I think we should not make artificial intelligence the enemy of natural intelligence, right? I think you should know that's where the organizational intelligence actually lies, in understanding which technology you want to use for what. Now, you can do so much with AI, right? And ensure that a lot of insights actually come to you about a particular customer. But what you do with that customer is entirely up to you as a person who's running that organization, right? So psychographics is basically segmenting the market on the basis of how people think, and not so much on the basis of demographics, which is their age and education and other details about that are rather more easy to find out. But psychographics helps you to segment the market in many ways. For example, people who are conservative in their risk-taking ability, people who are adventurous, and so on. So it's a field by itself that you'd use. But unfortunately, no data will ever throw it up. That is the real application of AI, if you ask me, because it's actually looking at a whole lot of data, and not just giving you the mathematical average and the standard deviation, but goes much beyond that, and actually tells you what is the person thinking at that point in time. So when you go to an e-commerce site and you look for a perfume, right? There's something there are a bunch of products it suggests along with that perfume. How did they know that? Because it's not just demographics, it's also psychographics, which at the back end is getting worked on because of a artificial intelligence engine which is actually running. So it's interesting, but you'll have to apply your mind and do the mapping right to do that. But if you do that, I think ultimately, please remember, we all have to remember that we are selling to human beings, and we should never lose sight of that.
Certainly, the two work together. The next question is, can AI help in marketing if the rest of the organization is not run on AI-powered tools and big data strategies? So how much can they expect in terms of ROI? Can small and medium companies also afford the same? Jim, I would point that to you.
Yeah, maybe Raj, you want to start on that one? I know you've got some thoughts on department by department.
Yes, so certainly. So if we look at the broad picture, if you look at who's consuming data the most in organizations now, it is marketing by a big shot, right? So marketers are using a lot of data about consumers to make their tactics and plans. Now, if the other, so you do need a whole organization behind for marketing to be actually successful. Right? So, I mean, there's a company in the US called CarMax. It's a retailer for used cars, right? And it's a $1 billion company, very successful, but they do a lot of AI in marketing. But for them to be successful, they had to have the systems in place first, right? So they had to work with they changed the CIO. Then there was a shift in the operations because this is a retail store. Whatever message they send the consumers, the retail store also needs to implement that, and there has to be a connection between those two. So that is certainly the ideal, and they take them a long time to do that, but you need connections across all these, like the CIO, CFO, COO, CMO, to do all of these things. That's the ideal. But can you do it? Not every organization can get that, that kind of support and that kind of transformation. So if you're in marketing, what do you do? Right? That's where you go with like things in our first stage, where we look at like just like, you know, the vendors that you have, Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, things that you have on your website, if you have a website. Let's start there and start like personalizing some messages or emails that you send your customers about like based on what they've behaved and what they did, right? So what they did on the website, if the email is customized to that, it goes a long way than a blast email about, hey, here are the 10 products that I sell, versus if somebody is looking at just like shoes, here is the shoe that you would like, right? Just that can become a personalization that you can start with and see the response and move from there.
Yeah, Larry, maybe jump in here. How do you think or advise companies? You said earlier, and we've all said, like, just get started, try some things, do some prototyping, experiment. But yet, pretty quickly, everybody's going to say, wait a minute, if every division, every department, every function just started experimenting, we'd have some chaos, and then at some point, a massive integration project. So how do you balance or square those two things?
Wow. Well, certainly, I do believe in starting small, and I think that you can do some things with small data and simple techniques like nearest neighbor or just simple statistical packages. And I agree that people should get started doing that. You raised a really fascinating question, because I apologize for this. I was thinking about the Coke machine example that you had also, which is like, it's so great because it's not just personalized marketing, it's personalized product development. You know, it's really you're moving way back into the chain of events that leads to somebody consuming something, and I think that's going to be it's a much bigger bridge. I mean, we have to think about flexible manufacturing, and certainly for products. Services are a little bit different, I think, but I think some companies will be able to do that, and I'm not sure that all have the capability to actually put that flexibility in. Although with things like 3D printing, I think are going to make that more feasible even for sort of physical products. I apologize for giving that kind of a vague answer. I think you just picked one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, Sundar, how do you advise companies, right? Because I mean, at a certain point, you could imagine a CIO or CEO or board saying, "Hey, freeze! Nobody does anything until we have a grand plan." But that could take years, and you mentioned some of these kind of challenges of big implementations. So how do you think about this?
Yeah, there is one company in which the CMO, the CIO, the CTO, the whole board, and the whole CEO, and everybody, CFO, are all aligned perfectly on artificial intelligence. There's such a company, and that company exists in utopia. I don't think there's any company in the world where everybody's aligned. It's not that people don't have the right intentions. It's, as organizations, we run under a lot of constraints, and there's always prioritization. So just like artificial intelligence is a priority for marketers, something else is a top priority for someone else. Supply chain optimization is equally important. So we can, and the board has only so much of finite resources that they can look at, and they have to prioritize. But this is a good problem to have, Jim, if you ask, because if your marketer is someone who is ambitious and who's adventurous, I think you have the right person in that place. God forbid, if the marketer is not willing to make those experiments, and you have the reverse problem where everybody in the company wants to try out things and your marketer, your CMO is the biggest constraint, then bad luck to you. I want the CMO to be an extremely ambitious, adventurous person. He's licensed to do that. Now, how does he do it? I think exactly to what Larry was saying, that he pinches a bit of budget, hides it somewhere, and runs this small experiments to prove to himself and have that conviction to go and present to the board that, look, this is what we did and this is what we got, and this is what we need to invest to get this way. People want to see that, and I don't think that's going to be a constraint.
Yes, no, exactly. And that's what Raj and I tried to characterize then as that sort of level 4 stage where you've done your experiments, you've got some proof of concept, you have some before and after, old way, new way data. Then you can go to the board and say, like, look, now build or buy, let's go. So, yeah, great. Prerna?
Yeah, so next question. The person says that, say I'm a poor farmer growing vegetables and I'm selling it in a local farmers market. So all this AI and AI application is largely, it requires a lot of R&D and a lot of investment and application. So how do you see that I can benefit in terms of productivity and in terms of efficiency, and at the same time, will I be able to afford it?
Well, maybe I'll start and then panelists jump in here. I've told this story before. We have some friends who own a small, one-location, little local restaurant, 10 tables or so. So not quite the local farmer, but a small family business. Certainly no CIO, no technology budget, this kind of thing. But what they wanted to do is predict or optimize how to maximize both diner satisfaction and maximum check, right? Like the amount of the ticket for every diner who comes. And part of that is convincing people to order dessert, right? Like an add-on. And so what they said is, how can we predict which customers are most likely and which desserts are most likely to be accepted? And if they could do that, they knew that that was a higher revenue and higher gross and net margin. And so what they did was they simply started with a little pencil and paper survey when they would bring the check to everyone with 3 or 4 questions. And then they hand entered that into an Excel database. And now, Larry, you can chime in here with your thoughts on this, but they used one of the many emerging, data science as service cloud platforms. It was Intersect Labs in this case, where they could then upload that file, determine what's the dependent and independent variables, and get a prediction back in real time. And then they use that to then tell their servers when the customers came in, these are the customers who you should really push dessert to, and this is what you should recommend. And they found a higher revenue and profitability out of that. So I don't know, Larry, what's your feeling on some of these cloud-based data science as service predictive engines?
Use them, absolutely. And I think that I love that. The only thing that would make that example better would be to go to sort of A/B testing instead of surveys, or something a little bit more natural in the service. But yeah, absolutely. I think there's good ways to get started using the existing platforms and services that are out there, especially if they're relatively inexpensive. I do want to speak to the issue of agriculture specifically, though, since that was brought up. I hope this is something that the Geo Institute will be able to actually address in the coming years. I think this is really, AI for agriculture is going to be a really critical area for the whole world. But if you look in the United States, where agriculture has become industrialized, it's going to develop in a different way, because it's going to develop for the massive industrial organizations that farms in the United States have become. It's not going to work in the context of India or much of the rest of the world, where there are small farmers who really form the backbone of the food production in those countries. And I think that building products and services that they can use that are affordable by them is really going to be an important challenge going forward, and one that I hope India can take the lead in making happen.
And sorry, just to add here, just to what Larry said, that AI for social sector and social space in India is really big, and companies, including like Geo, like ourselves here, are investing in AI platform for agriculture, education, healthcare as well. So I think some of that investment in this space will also be really helpful. Thank you for pointing that out, Larry. My next question is, how do you think AI and machine learning can be implemented in B2B strategy for B2B client acquisition? Um, so to keep in mind and to bring in the aspects of India here, which is a very, very cost conscious market. So how do you address again the issues of affordability in this space?
Yeah, Raj, and then maybe Sundar on B2B.
So I think B2B is an interesting space for AI, and where, in fact, contrary to popular opinion, a lot of activity is actually happening there, right? And I'll come to the Indian context in a minute, but there are at least 3 examples I can see in B2B where companies have used it, right? There's a company called TE Connectivity in the US, and they do this electric switches. And there was a traditional industrial boots on the ground kind of company. And turns out their customers over time became companies like Facebook and Google, and the buyers there are already searching about the company before they're like the salespeople show up online. The buyers in Facebook know more about the company's products than probably the salesperson does. And they had to go through this whole journey of digital transformation, digitalization, and understanding the digital customer journey and enabling the salesforce with digital. The other example is another industrial company called Industrial Scientific. They have industrial in the name too, right? And they do these sensors for within microphones that people use in oil rigs. And these are really important because this is a safety issue for people working in these hazardous conditions. What they did was use those IoT sensors to build a dashboard for understanding people's movements using those sensors and for enabling their clients to improve worker safety using the IoT data. And that was an additional service that they provided in addition to the sensors. And speaking on sensors, you see, and this is where some of the India context comes in. Safety is important everywhere, so IoT and that is certainly important. The other I've seen like companies like Siemens, when we have run programs for them, one of the main things they do is they have these sensors in all their machines. What this allows them is to see the wear and tear of the machines and do preventive maintenance. So it's not only, okay, Siemens is selling their own products so that they don't go to a third-party service parts provider, but the company has less downtime and is saving a lot more costs. So in that sense also, within the Indian context, when you're cost conscious, leveraging some of this IoT and talking to your consumers about how your customers, your industrial customers, about how some of these technologies can actually help them save money in the long term could be actually a valuable value proposition.
Yeah, so just chiming on that, completely agree with Professor Venkateshan. I think that B2B has seen some of the most interesting implementations because I think the value that you get out of it, the ROI is significantly higher for very, very comparable, investment that you make in AI. I think the chief, the main purpose of using AI in the whole sales and marketing process is actually the disintermediation of sales. Like what Professor Venkateshan just alluded to, that more than 80% of B2B customers actually have not only found enough about your product, but also have made up their mind probably in the way they want to buy. It's very evident to us even before a salesperson actually meets people, they have a very good framework available on how they want to compare and contrast. So this is your moment. Find out who are the people who are looking for you, get that message clearly across to them in the most relevant and authentic manner. That is the job of, that's really the purpose of AI in B2B marketing. The usage of DDOM, which is the data-driven operating model in marketing, is one of the earliest use cases, if I may say. which has been used. We have been using it for a couple of years now very successfully to predict and set a very strong working rhythm in terms of precisely the question which is on customer acquisition, and it has worked out very well. B2B space is finite. That's the good news, where you always know who your customers are. So it's easy to track what are they, what is the message, what did resonate, what did not resonate, who are the passive people and why are they passive, how do I get them activated, and so on. It can be very, very interesting. It's not as dull as people make it out to be. B2B, some of these implementations can be very, very interesting. I heard about a steel company which actually has done a very, very interesting way of segmentation of their market to roll out a very sophisticated customer value management process using artificial intelligence in India with very limited data. Again, it doesn't mean that you can get started only after you have gigabytes of data available. With very limited data that was largely internal, they have been building models which help them predict. And you can go out as far as you can with your imagination about how you use the data. If you're waiting for that perfect moment, as I said, it will definitely happen in utopia very, very soon.
Thank you, Sundar. So the next question that I have, it's really close to the industry that we are from, higher education sector. So what one of our attendees asked is, how do we use AI and the techniques or the AI marketing canvas for acquisition of the right student body in our university?
Oh,
So
really
Jim,
interesting.
to you.
Really interesting question, Raj. I have some thoughts, but you want to start us off?
Jim, why don't you start?
Well, look, I mean, it all comes down to, as Dr. Larry advised us, like, what problem are you trying to solve? What is the variable that, if we were better able to predict it, would give a better outcome? And what does better, or what does success look like, right? So, is it more students? Is it a different kind of student? Is it a better completion rate at the end of the program? Like, what is it that you're trying to predict? And then, where can I gather data in the process? I know several global and U.S. for-profit universities have been down this path, trying to figure out, what message do I put in front of what prospective student on what website at what time, in order to get a better interest rate, meaning better click-through rate on those ads, getting them to download some information or sign up to meet with an admissions officer, ultimately to get them to enroll and complete the program more successfully. So, I don't know, Raj, Larry, if you've thought further about this, but I think all the things we've talked about in the Canvas, there's no reason why a higher education institute couldn't follow that maturity curve as well.
Like picking where to go to school, I suppose, a little bit like picking a date or something. I mean, it's a very personal choice in a lot of ways, and I think that I think it's a great problem, actually. Helping people find the right place for them is really a wonderful problem, and something that could really add a lot of value to. Right now it's a pretty haphazard process that I'm not familiar with how it happens in India, but in the United States there's a sort of a set of rituals at different levels of the market about how to go through picking where you're going to go to school. But I think it could absolutely be helped a lot through technology. And this actually reminds me a little bit of the B2B, the issue that came up, that the customers already know what they want by the time they contact the salesperson. To me, that suggests that the way to move forward is to provide those customers with better tools to educate themselves about what they want, that's the way to actually kind of get them to want your product, because you're helping them figure out what they need and want. And I think that's the path for higher education as well. I think the right student is the student who understands that this is the right choice for them, actually.
Yeah. So I would add that I think I agree with all what was said, and I would add that the challenge in higher ed, which I've seen is in the traditional higher ed model, where you have degree programs and admission cycles. It's almost as like the same challenge the politics field has. There is one cycle, and there is a lot of activity going towards that one cycle of admissions through which you want the results to come out. So if you're focused on moving analytics into admissions, you'll see a lot of resistance because they're saying, well, there are so many different levels in the cycle. It's only one time and there's capacity constraint. How do I measure the ROI? But if you shift that, and that's where placing where you use AI and analytics is important. But if you're looking at building the brand, building the website traffic, building the portfolio of things, that's where you see a lot of ROI, because you can see the measurement is on the website traffic and links and alumni engagement and donations and so forth. So the places, if you're thinking about broadly as an educational institution, I would place the best, the fastest returns would be on website, brand development, would be on donations and alumni engagement. And if you're running exec-ed courses, short company courses, those are the places where you see FX. Degree programs, eventually it rolls into it, but it's a very different kind of enrollment system.
If I could add one more thing here. I mean, I think it's one question from the university or college's perspective or the educational institution's perspective, how do they find the right student body? But there's a big equity question here as well, because there's so many, fantastically talented young people, especially, but everybody at all ages, who could use opportunities very successfully to not only improve themselves, but make the world better. And we're probably not doing a very good job at identifying those people and giving them those opportunities right now. And I think that there's a great challenge there. Again, not thinking about the end of the marketing pipeline, but the beginning. How do you even reach out and identify those people where they didn't even know that this was a possibility for them?
Thank you, Dr. Larry. So with that, I would like to conclude the question and answers. We do have some very exciting questions also, which we can take up separately on email and send across. I see Dr. Mashelkar wants to share some thoughts. So over to you, Dr. Mashelkar.
Well, all that I wanted to do was say how fascinating the last 2 hours have been. I learned so much. So thank you, Jim, Larry, Sundar, Raj, for a fantastic session. I could see repeated reference to Geo Institute. And I can assure you, we will work for AI for all, not AI for just some. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So with that, I would request Dr. Frank Mulhorn also to share some concluding thoughts.
Yes, you hear me okay?
If you could speak up a little, be better.
Okay, does that sound good? I thought that was a terrific session, so thank you for Jim and all of the panelists. It was actually really terrific. A couple of things I just want to go back on, because I heard these words so many times. One Jim talked about extensively was prediction. So many of the issues are prediction and getting that more accurate. And then the other one is personalization. Now, personalization has been around a long time in marketing, starting back with looking on at least the consumer side where there wasn't an individual salesperson, but direct marketing was all about addressability and personalization. And that really was essentially revolutionary in the world of big brands and big media and television advertising. But direct marketing was very crude and error prone. And it's now AI that is making personalization very efficient and very effective, as Jim and the panelists have pointed out. And I think the real key there is ultimately it's about people. Personalization is brands connecting with consumers, but it's really using AI to better serve people in a marketing context or in the many of the other contexts that were mentioned in this symposium. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost because we think so much about data and hardware and software and programs, meaning computer programs and technology things. But ultimately, it's about people, again, in the marketing context, that's consumers, and media, that's audiences. And ultimately, that's the value that AI is bringing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Frank. I hope that the audience also, found the talk as exciting and useful as I did. With that, I would request Dr. Palak Sheth, Project Director of Geo Institute, to share a word of thanks.
Thank you, Prerna. As we end the first day of the symposium, on behalf of entire Geo Institute team, I would like to extend a very warm and hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers for sharing their perspective and their knowledge today. I think it was invaluable for all our audience and everyone at the Geo Institute. Let me also express our profound gratitude to Dr. Mashelkar, our Chancellor of Geo Institute, for his constant guidance and gracing this event today. We would also like to extend our thanks to Dr. Deepak Jain, Vice Chancellor of Geo Institute, for his academic vision and rigor that we are putting a very strong foundation for a world-class institution for India. We are also highly appreciative of the leadership, encouragement, and extensive support provided by Dr. Frank Mulhorn, our program mentor for digital media and marketing communication. Frank, we are really thankful for your guidance and leading us to this path forward. And this conference could not have been envisaged or could be organized without Frank. So thanks a lot to you, Frank. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the star of the show, or the most respected Jim Lesinski. We could not thank you enough for sharing the knowledge on AI and the marketing and some key highlights that you have presented today. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence, the perspective, the cases that you have shared. We would also like to extend our gratitude to the panel member for their continuous support. Sundarji, Rajkumar, and Larry. Larry is our program mentor for AI and data science. We work very closely, and he and Frank is a guiding, lighting torch for all of us and make us moving. Thank you very much. Over to you, Prem.
Thank you, Palak Bhai. So with that, it really brings us to the end of today's session, which is a very exciting journey for us. From learning the new definition of OPs to learning a whole new canvas, and also how AI can really be implemented for personalization, and how COVID has impacted, and how it has sort of reset the landscape for everyone to learn and everyone to implement new techniques. I thank everyone once again, and I request everyone to join us tomorrow for a very insightful session again on marketing technology by Jonathan Kopalski, the former Chief Marketing Officer from Deloitte and faculty at Medill School and Kellogg School of Management. He will be joined in the panel with Mr. John Parker, Dr. Alan Schulman, and Mr. Nitin Garg. So with that, once again, goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you. We look forward to seeing you in the lounge. Dr. Larry Birnbaum has kindly said that he'll be available in the lounge right after this session. So if anybody would like to talk to him and learn more from him about Geo Institute's AI program, or otherwise how AI is implemented in marketing and storytelling, please feel free.
Prerna,
Palak Bhai wants to add something here.
Yeah, Prerna, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Prerna for such a wonderful host, managing this whole program, and all our Geo team, including Naman, Pramod, Ritu, so many other people who has already tirelessly working to make this happen in such a short time. So thank you for the entire Geo team, and kudos to all of you to making this happen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the encouragement. And of course, I'm supported by a really, really committed and diligent team that has worked tirelessly for the event at the back end. And I'm really thankful to all the panelists here again. Once again, look forward to seeing you all tomorrow and day after for another encouraging session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.